Now, when we look at our muscles, let's say just on a thigh, and we'll break that down. So I'm gonna abandon some of the basic how to draw stuff and leave that to you guys to work on, and we'll get more straight to the anatomy and all of our other goals here, so we don't spend too much time turning this into an intermediate construction class. So that's not what it was about. So if when we look at muscles, let's say take a chunk of the quadricep, the rector femoris, the straight. Rector just means straight. The straight muscle of the front of the leg goes into a tendon, and these other guys, quadriceps 4, there's 4 heads. We only have to worry about 3. They come together, called the common tendon. Come down here. But what we're going to have is an interesting thing when we look at muscles. The muscles will either, whatever their shape, we'll just do the classic teardrop, will either follow straight down the axis of the structure as the rector femoris or erector muscles of the back. The name oftentimes implies that straight shot down. And it may or may not pick up the gesture. The gesture is a development of all the muscles working in relationship with the bone, and together they create a certain fluid movement. The rector may not, and often doesn't, show that curved idea. Now it curves on both sides, but that can't, when it curves both sides, it actually cancels out and stiff and straight. We need one side to curve, or both sides to curve in the same direction to create a gesture, a curved axis that moves us fluidly and lifelike way, in a lifelike way down. This is going to go straight down. But notice this muscle goes right down the axis. That's fine. Tibialis anterior down here does the same thing, basically. That lifts your toes off the ground. Fine. I'm not as interested in those muscles, though. In fact, I don't even like them very much, although I do need to deal with them sometimes. But more often, I'll group those into a greater whole. Notice if we pick up the whole quadricep now. Quad, 4 sep heads, 4 heads too. As I said, we only have to worry about 3. We have the vastus externus, we have the vastus internus. They all come down to the common tendon and attach in one way or another to the kneecap, and then that goes into the patellar tendon, attaches onto the tibia. Still talk more? Okay. Notice when we add all that mass, vastus externus orients very high on the outside of the leg. Here's the knee construction here, let's say. Whole knee, not kneecap, whole knee structure. Vastus internus, externus outside. Here's the pubic area, inside or internus. Notice the vastus internus hangs low. And that's interesting and important, and that's the way muscles work. Remember, muscles or tend to work, not always, but it's the way we want them to work, ideally. Because here's what happens. Muscles only do one thing. They work or they don't work. They work or they relax. If they work, they're in some way fighting gravity. That's that leverage. We've created a machine to more efficiently, in this case not super efficiently, fight gravity. If I push that down, I can lift that up, fight gravity. So they're either fighting gravity or giving in to gravity. Now, for me, that's a great emotional metaphor. You can be either aggressive and be a winner, let's say, or be submissive and be defeated. So you either give in to gravity or you fight it. And there's a few ways to do that, but this is one of the ways. High to low. And muscles want to do that because you have, say, the quadriceps, and then you have the hamstring on back. The quadriceps extend the leg out, straighten the leg. The hamstring tightens, contracts the leg, bends it. Bicep bends the arm up, The tricep extends the arm out. When one side is working, when the tricep is working, the bicep is going to relax. It wants to flatten and deflate and get out of the way so we have a more fluid motion, and it's just more efficient if everything's not working. Unless you're a bodybuilder flexing everything at once, which doesn't get you very far. It's hard to get even to the refrigerator doing that. Then we're going to have this action relaxation dynamic, this rising up and falling down. And in fact, that's so efficient, and the body is so interested in not only creating stability to fight and hold against gravity, but mobility to spring through and dynamically change, that it doesn't want to get muscle bound. And so it's going to tend to design forms when it can in this asymmetrical dynamic, even if they're both relaxed. So notice if we look at the inside of the quadricep, it hangs low. And if we look at the outside of the quadricep, it sits high. And notice if we drew an egg, just a simple structure for that. And notice we wouldn't even have to understand anatomy to benefit from this. Notice how the tube, let's make it real simple, the tube went this way on the thigh, but when we took this particular section of the thigh, it became a different shape potentially. That's interesting. I've refined and made more nuanced, more complicated my drawing, and now it seems to be more real because it feels more sophisticated. We tend to trust that. So every time I add something new onto it, it starts to be more sophisticated and ring true. And notice that this was the direction, whether I build in a curved gesture or not, this is the directional axis of the whole thigh. This is the directional axis of just the quadricep. Notice how if we put an egg inside this other structure, no matter how we conceived of it, curved or not, that egg is always going to be, or whatever structure we chose to think of it as, is always going to be off axis if done properly. And that is exactly as it should be, because that's going to make it more dynamic. It's going to give an interest to it, because part of aesthetics is the balance between symmetry and asymmetry. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but we'll spend the next 2.5 days working through it. And so now we have a nice asymmetry here, and then we have the other leg over here to create our symmetry. And that balance gives us lots of creative choices and rings true for our audience. So what we want to do is make sure when we add these muscle structures on, whether they're just architectural shapes that we observe, or whether they're carefully thought out anatomical truths, we want to look for this off-axis connection. We want to be aware of whether it's a erector muscle, a straight muscle that goes up and down, that hinge joint, say, or if it goes off axis because of more dynamic possibilities. And we would prefer to have it go off axis. And there's all sorts of reasons why that we'll get to as we move along.